John's Comics with Kids. Thanks for being my next guest on 7.5 Questions.
I'm just glad to be here. Thanks for including me.
Awesome. That's what I like to hear. You're on board with everything. No questions. You're ready to rock and roll, right?
I am fully ready. So much so the teacher in me said, I'm going to get a whiteboard and I'm going to be writing the keywords down. I'm ready for the lesson.
All right. Now, you know this doesn't have to be grammatically correct when you're all done.
It will be.
All right. That's acceptable. Well, let's start off with your first keyword. Okay. Your keyword, first keyword, as I look around for male.
As in man?
That's up to you.
Ooh.
It's up to you. It's your call.
Interesting. Okay. Now I've got flexibility.
It's just hopefully it makes it a little easier. All right. Let's start off with question number 1, as opposed to starting off with question 7, right?
Hey. You do you.
Question number 1. How did you come up with your IG handle?
Well, so originally I had 2 accounts that were kind of linked, right? I was doing a family account and I was just posting comic books on it. But as I started to make friends, one of the friends that I think had the biggest impact on me was Bueller. And anybody who follows Comics with Bueller, I think Travis was easily one of the most helpful, supportive, and overall just like fun people that I had found on YouTube and Instagram at the beginning. And I liked his style, Comics with Bueller. And so I kind of adopted certain elements of that and wanted it to highlight what my channel was about, which was me and comics and my girls. And I think that became a natural sort of comics with kids, was sort of the natural element. And I was pretty clear with my wife that this was not going to it was not going to be this thing with just me. And if it was just my escape, then it wasn't going to be something that I was going to enjoy as much. But my girls are such fans and such readers and so interested in comics that it was definitely going to always be a significant part of what I do.
So, and how old are the kids?
I have one going into 8th grade next year and one going into 5th grade next year. So I have a teenager for the first time, and I have a pre-teenager. They read voraciously. They just everything, anything. They've always been just the best readers. I feel like read to your kids a ton when they're young, and you will make readers out of them. It's just worked beautifully at our house, and I love the way they love stuff that I never got into. They love like Charlie loves early Silver Age DC books. She'll happily read Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane all day. She's got her little box. Biggie Shack named it her banger box. It's got all of her DC bangers in it. And those are, that era speaks to her. She reads Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys and all that stuff of a certain era that's very nostalgic for her somehow. As a 10-year-old, you'd think why would a 10-year-old girl be interested? But that stuff has connected with her in a really big way.
Just wait till they're both in high school.
Right, yeah. I'm sure that my channel will evolve. Bueller jokingly said, it'll eventually be John's Comics with teens, and then it'll be John's Comics with kids who want nothing to do with him. It'll evolve.
So your logo, how did you come up with the logo you use for your YouTube channel?
I originally had something very simple. I love primary colors for the most part for that kind of thing. So yellow, blue, and red were always going to be significant. And I had something very simple. And then an Instagram friend redid a bunch of logos for people. Was like, hey, if you like it, you could use it. And he's no longer on Instagram anymore, but he made me this logo. It looks funny because it's it almost looks like a diner that you would see on the side of the road driving along. It's got this sort of fun little diner font. But what I love about it is it feels like it pops in chats. So when I jump into a chat, I feel like people can see it right away. It stands out. It's this kind of bright yellow with those little cursive inside of it, and isn't distracting. It's very simple. I love a simple, clean kind of design. Like your green one with the double H's is just a real crisp design that pops, and people don't have
not
to
too muddy.
You don't have to read the name. I don't even need to read Hoarder Hyde, right? I just need to see, boom, the double H's, and I know that it's Scott.
Yeah, and I never thought about it, but you're right. It's the like you said, the roadside diner. I can see that being outside of a hotel in Florida.
Totally.
You know, something on the beach.
So, I mean, I might upgrade it at some point, but it's always going to have, I think, a real clean, simple design, yellow background, primary colors on top, you know, that Wonder Woman color palette, basically.
All right. All right, let's go on to question number 2. What was the first comic you remember reading?
So this was one that I didn't have to think too hard about. I'm a kid of the 80s. That was when I was reading books as a young guy. And there were a bunch of that mid 80s. I mean, I've got some early X-Men and stuff over here as well. But the book I remember getting was this reprint of Hulk 180 and 181 and 182, which sort of was their way of going back and letting younger readers get a chance to enjoy these books. It's got a wraparound, so it's got the they hid the Wendigo on the back because nobody cared, but like, you know, he's still there. They also have like this whole like evolution of Wolverine section in the back because he was in the brown suit at this portion in history in '86. But I loved this issue, and I read mine till it fell apart. And then a good friend gave me this. They said, "Oh, I got one. If you know," I mentioned how I had read it and loved it as a kid, and they sent me this. So this was an issue I remember buying off of a spinner rack at a 7-Eleven and just devouring until the pages and covers were falling off.
So that's not the original book,
no,
but
this one came from Barbarian Kung Fu. Chad is a really great community member, and he saw me do a video where I was recounting the story of that, and he's like, "Oh, I got a couple of those. Like, yeah, you can have one." It's not like it's this like $100 comic or anything. It's definitely a book that means way more to me than the average collector would just be like, it's another reprint of Hulk 180 and 181.
Right.
But for me, it was like, what? Wolverine fought the Hulk? And I had never, for me, the Wolverine I grew up with was this Wolverine. And this was the era, this is the same basic era. So this was 86 and this was 86, right? Yeah, I think they both came out in 86. Yep. So like that was when I bought books off of the shelves, it was this Wolverine. And to see that other story kind of told so beautifully was like, yeah, I want more of this. And then of course you find all the what if Wolverine killed Hulk and what if Hulk killed Wolverine, and you get into all that sort of that whole time in history, you know.
And at 86, and that's first, and you bought that yourself.
That one, no, neither of these are the copy. I mean, I bought them
originally,
yeah. But I've definitely had to upgrade. I used to put tracing paper on these books and like get a pencil out and draw hard lines on them. And you don't want to see the one that's the worst is the first appearance of Bishop from X-Men. He's on that cover, a really great looking cover. And I used to just trace that like over and over again, Bishop. And you can feel the grooves all over that cover of me just tracing that book 1,000 times.
Yeah, press might take those out.
It might. I ended up just buying a 9.6 in an auction at one point, being like, you know what? I'll keep my original one just for the nostalgia of it, but I want a nicer looking one, so I don't look at it and go, oh man, what was I doing?
So out of those books, you know, from the 80s as a kid, how many of them do you still have around in your PC? And you know, do you know what happened to the ones that you don't have, like that Wolverine and Hulk you just showed?
I'm fairly certain the ones that became just like rags, where like the cover was disconnecting pages. My mom probably just threw them away at some point. She just got frustrated picking up the scraps at some point. There are definitely a few of those uncanny X-Men's in that mid 200s range that I still have that are pretty beat up. And I had some Spider-Man from that era that I have that are still kicking a little bit. The ones I'm most proudest of, I still have some of the Secret Wars. I with my own money, I purchased the 12-issue run, and issue 8 was still pretty hot, but it wasn't like what it is now. And I still have that original 12-issue run, and they actually look pretty good. They don't look like mangled. That's one of the few runs that I read that a bunch, and it still looks pretty good. I'm proud.
Now, do you remember what made you pick up that Wolverine book? You know, if that's the first book you remember.
It was Wolverine. I was way into like the mutant world was interesting to me. So I saw this guy on the cover with the claws, and I was like, that guy looks really cool, you know? And so then it was easy to get into like, oh, he's got 2 different colored uniforms. Okay, interesting. Tell me more. And then, you know, he was on the cover of that one with his face all big, like and it's all torn. And I was like, this is interesting. Then instantly found Sabretooth, and it was like my universe instantly was that whole whatever was surrounding Wolverine at the time. That's where I went.
That one, maybe not necessarily that one book that you got, but that 3-issue arc was a catalyst for a lot of people, and a lot of people reading and collecting both. I mean, totally. It's insane how much that particular arc has influenced, you know, the hobby and the industry.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it because I've got friends that loved it for Hulk. I got friends that loved it for Wolverine, and then some just were like, it's just a good run. Like I read it as an adult like a year ago with a friend for a book club discussion, and I was like, this is a really good Wendigo story. Like Wolverine's like almost unimportant in these 3 issues. It's a Wendigo story, and Wendigo is actually the riveting heart of those 3 issues.
All right. It's a good first book.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's culturally significant, but not necessarily financially significant, but certainly culturally, I think it was a nice milestone book.
Well, and it made you want to get those 3 original issues, didn't it?
Yeah, well, yes, but yeah, I'm never going to get a 181, but yeah.
Don't say never.
I got a 180, and it's on its way to CGC, but that's I'm good enough with that.
All right. Keyword time.
Oop.
Keyword number 2. In honor of your first comic, let's go with Wolverine.
Nice. Okay, I'm taking notes.
Okay. Question number 3. This is kind of a long one. When it comes to your PC, what's your favorite age, genre, publisher, and title? And now those are all, independent. They don't, none of them have to combine. But
well, and I think it's when I read that question, I was thinking a little bit about like to read or to collect or to because there's so many aspects of that, and I think I'll do reading first because I'm a reader first, and that's kind of my thing. I love currently reading Image comics. I think that's probably my favorite thing to read is Image comics, and I try to get almost all of their number 1s. I buy a ton of Image trade paperbacks. I think I've as an adult coming back to this hobby after my girls were born, I found a love for non-superhero stories that I didn't think I would ever find, and started reading some Vertigo books, and then found my way over to Image, which I had collected as a kid when it was all superhero-y, when it was Eric Larson and Savage Dragon and all that great stuff.
Right.
But then I found it as an adult and was like, okay, there's some really great series here, and they're all by these supremely talented writers and artists, and people who I might have loved from, Jason Aaron's Thor, but then I find his book Scalped or Southern Bastards or something else that I'm like, wow, Jason Aaron has this whole universe of talent that is able to be explored in a company like Image. So for reading right now, my favorite publisher is definitely Image, and I feel like they are consistently doing amazing things. Like Philadelphia right now, I can't say enough nice things about that book. I just finished, I'm caught up on Descender and Ascender, these great sci-fi books by Jeff Lemire. So that Image is my publisher du jour today. And my favorite book is probably Descender from them, and they're finishing Ascender. And my favorite reading era is probably modern. I really enjoy reading modern indie books. So it all kind of culminates for me in just finding people who have a real talent. And Jeff Lemire right now, I'm all about Jeff Lemire. I know a lot of people are finding him through Sweet Tooth, which just premiered on Amazon, I think, or Netflix. I don't know. Oh, sorry, I don't remember which one it's on. But that's a great series by him. And Black Hammer, I recently finished reading that whole run of comics, which is it's 13 trade paperbacks. It's a ton to get into, but wow, what a really expansive universe. He basically went Jack Kirby and created, instead of the New Gods and Dark Side and all this stuff, he created his own comic book universe. And it is so amazing that Dark Horse let him do that, and he is running wild over there with these amazing stories and all these interconnected all of them paying homage to great Silver Age and Golden Age characters, but doing it in his modern aesthetic, which I think has just been really killer. He did was it Skull Digger and Skeleton Boy was his homage just recently to Batman and Robin, and I thought it was fantastic. He even had this great Joker villain character. I thought it was really the first time I thought somebody dove into the Batman world and had something original to say. So I was blown away.
Yeah, and I haven't read any of those.
Yeah, I mean, and I had not either. Say, if you had talked to me 10 years ago, I was in a totally different place with my collecting, and my girls were just being born, and I was a superhero collector almost exclusively. I had never read anything outside of DC and Marvel. And then I was blessed to find a local comic shop with an amazing owner who cares about his customers. And I know that a lot of people don't have that, but my own, so it's Nuclear Comics in Orange County, California. And Kenny, who runs it and owns it, is an amazing guy. And he was always willing to give me time and recommend things and say, oh, you like this? You should try this. Oh, you like that? You should think about this. And he's never been wrong. Everything he's ever recommended to me has been of a quality that I felt like, wow, thank you for sharing that. And it brought me to a whole other understanding of comics, whether that was Vertigo when I first came in and he had Swamp Thing and Sandman, or he had Why the Last Man, which I recently got a #1 of that. I was so excited. So he connected me to another layer of comics that was perfect for where I was as an adult. And it wasn't just about nostalgia, which is the collecting side, which we can get to in a second, but for the modern reader in me who wanted stories. It's like, I remember Frank Miller saying when he got a chance to write Batman, he didn't want to write the same Batman everybody else was doing, because he was not the same kid he was reading Batman. He wanted to write the Batman who was older. So he did Dark Knight Returns. And I was in a similar place as a collector. I didn't want to necessarily read I didn't want my X-Men to be the same X-Men they were when I was a kid, because I can go back and read that anytime I want. I wanted to see where they are now. And getting into Vertigo comics and Image comics allowed me that place of where I was currently, and books could connect to me at that spot,
Okay.
But now collecting, collecting, I'm a Bronze and Silver Age guy, and I generally buy almost exclusively Bronze and I occasionally modern stuff, but like I want those books that are either from the era when I was first getting into comics or connected to that, right? So I mean I did not get a chance to read John Romita Sr. right off the shelf, but finding the first, getting the first appearance of him drawing Spider-Man, John Romita Sr. is amazing, and his Spider-Man is my childhood.
What issue is that? What issue number?
This is Daredevil 16, and it's the first time that John Romita Sr. ever drew Spider-Man, and it's an amazing cover. It's almost got a photoreal image of New York in the back.
That's why it caught my eye, because it has a resemblance to 45, which is the mixed media cover where it's the two characters superimposed over top of
exactly
a photo of a building, but that actually is 100% drawn.
It's all drawn. It's amazing.
Good. That means I don't have to buy another expensive book.
So I mean, I remember.
But yeah, from a distance, I would have swore that was a photo cover. Yeah, in fact, I apologize because I've been staring at it the whole time, not you.
I understand. I mean, I thank you to I'm going to try to remember who gave this to me. Man Cave Comics gave me this. And it was the throwaway book. He's like, oh, I just wanted to put something else in there with the book I wanted to send you. And I was like, but that's the first time that Romita drew. I mean, I had Romita pillowcases. I had, Romita bed sheets. I had Romita posters. Every board game I played as a kid had a drawing of Spider-Man by John Romita Sr. That was the identifiable iconography of Spider-Man. It was never anybody but Romita Sr. Sorry.
And first appearance of Masked Marauder and Stan Lee script.
Yes. I mean, it's got all the all-stars on there.
Yeah.
So the books that I collect are usually going to be older. I love the Claremont run of X-Men. If I had to pick a run and an era, I mean, you're talking about Claremont's X-Men all the way. That Claremont, Cockrum, and Byrne triumvirate is the peak for me. I had never bought an omnibus until I started buying those. Like that's the only I had to have those so that I could read them. I didn't want to read them all digitally. I don't want to open up all my books, and I want to be able to enjoy those. The visuals, man, John Byrne, baby, Byrne. It's just so good. And so yeah, that era, Silver, and then bleeding into as Spider-Man was, the death of Gwen Stacy, as we were dealing with the death of the Phoenix, like those arcs leading from Silver into Bronze are almost all of my favorites to collect and to sort of nostalgically appreciate.
But you'd much rather read the modern stuff.
When it comes to like reading these days, I usually prefer indie comics and I usually prefer Image. There's my girls love the nostalgia. I mean, my girls have been going through my Omnis lately. I've been teaching them how to care for Omnis. So it's like, you gotta, stretch the spine this way and that way. And they've been reading those Omni Claremont run books, and it's been fun to go back with them and experience it. But when it comes to reading something for the very first time, there's something about the modern indie scene that is so impactful. Because it's just like movies, that every genre that you could appreciate. You like science fiction, you like horror, you like, comedy. Like there is somebody out there right now writing that. And you find somebody who connects with you aesthetically, and that's you found a writer or an artist that you can continue to appreciate.
Right. Agree with that 100%. You find either that writer you like or that artist that you just love their work, and then that's it. It's all it takes. You know?
Absolutely.
Right. If I heard right, you said the kids actually like to read the old stuff. You think more than they do the new stuff?
I would say my youngest daughter, my 10-year-old, yes, absolutely. And, she would skip a more modern recent book in favor of something like a Hardy Boys or a Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, right? She's going to go to that Silver Age DC place way ahead of most modern stuff. It doesn't mean she won't try things and won't enjoy. She reads everything, but her comfort zone is definitely, I got a new Nancy Drew, like one of the old Nancy Drew books. I'd love to check that out.
Cool.
It's fun. I mean, I would say I never try to force them one way or another. It's been fun to see where their interests kind of go. My oldest got into Greek mythology and that was like her passion. And she found these great graphic novel series where they basically retell every great Greek legend and myth in its own graphic novel. And my LCS always stocked them. And so it was perfect. She could go and buy I got to read Apollo this week or Artemis. And she gets that book and it was a great learning experience. And now she knows, she'll pick up a Wonder Woman and be like, oh, I know who's going to come in here. I know who the bad guy is going to be. Like I know all the mythology around Wonder Woman's world now. So I got it.
So she's beyond just the Iliad and the Odyssey then.
Yes, way past.
Oh, that's awesome. I love to hear that.
That's the next generation. It's going to keep this hobby going if the kids find something that speaks to them.
Right, which is too many people are on phone. That's
my wife sent me a meme where it was like two moms at the park with their kids next to them, and one mom's got her book and her daughter's reading, and the one mom's got her phone out and her daughter's looking at the phone, and the mom on the phone is turning to the other mom saying, how do you get your kids to read? And it was like she couldn't see it for the moment. Yeah. Right. It's like they were copying what they're taught, and in our household, my wife was never a huge reader, but she knew that it was important. So at night our bedtime routine could take an hour of I'm going to read with one daughter for 20 minutes, and then you're going to read with the other one for 20 minutes, and then we're going to swap, and brushing teeth will happen in there. And it was an important bonding time, but we were laying the groundwork for enjoying stories and enjoying books.
Yeah, there needs to be more of that.
Absolutely.
There really does. All right. Question number 4. Is there a book from your collecting experience that got away from you? Something you should have bought, passed up on for whatever reason?
Yeah. So, and I feel like it's hitting close to home because it was just last year. I had made a plan. I had looked at my collecting and I had finished my Claremont run. I had gotten every issue, and that was my biggest goal. And I was starting to look at what I wanted to get next, and I had been saving a little bit of money. And I thought, what, now is the time. I'm going to get that Daredevil #1. I'm just going to get this book. It's the perfect time. And I had saved up, and then all of a sudden that book just popped. And I had my eyes on a couple of copies, but then the boom of that book happened, and it's now the same amount of money that was going to get me a 7 is going to maybe get me a 0.5 or something. Now it's that book exploded in a huge way, and it was a heartbreaking fall because I was ready, and then it was nope, I can't do this now, and had to basically make the decision that that book had now become X-Men #1, the original, and a book that I was fine putting on a list of other books that I just will never be able to afford. Hulk 181 or something where it's the first appearance of Dick Grayson. I'm not going to be able to afford that book anymore. It was hard because it was within the grasp. If I had pulled the trigger 6 months earlier, I would have had a beautiful 7.0 or whatever copy. But in the end, I had to have a long conversation with myself and just say, like, that was a lot of money, but now you are free to maybe buy some other books that you would really care about that might also mean something to you. And once I was able to kind of get over the speed bump of that book's gone, like what else is there? And I ended up going and getting a bunch of great Batman Villains Silver Age books that I had not purchased at that point. So I got first Catwoman in the Silver Age, Scarecrow in the Silver Age. I got some great Silver Age books that I'm so glad that I was able to get. And I got my Y the Last Man #1, and I know that with the show coming and everything, I just wanted a really nice high grade copy of that. And that same Daredevil money, that money was able to kind of go to other books that I love, and I was able to kind of I was able to make myself feel better about that by just letting that book go and appreciating some of those other books that I could enjoy just as much. I have some Yellow Suit Daredevils, and I have. So
the book was Daredevil 1.
Daredevil 1.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I've got the Marvel Masterworks hardcover of those first 8 issues or what have you, and I've read those books a bunch. I still think Daredevil is one of those characters that is so much bigger than comics, because this idea of being a handicapped superhero was way ahead of its time, this concept, and the character of Matt Murdock is so layered. I think he's one of those guys that's had more great runs at Marvel than just about anybody. I mean, you look at Bendis and Brubaker and Wade and Frank Miller, of course. I mean, Frank Miller all day.
Yeah.
Frank Miller Daredevil is absolutely one of my favorites. And then of course Zdarsky right now is having an all-time great run on Daredevil. And I think it's because that character resonates on so many levels. There's a religious level that's really fascinating. There's a law and legal level where he's a vigilante by day, but a lawyer by night, somebody who's following the law by day and then breaking the law at night.
A nice dichotomy there.
Right. And I think also he's got a wonderful rogues gallery. So good that they basically stole Kingpin from Spider-Man and put him over in Daredevil's universe more. I really appreciate that realm and what a lot of different writers and artists have been able to do with him. So it was a hard one to let go of, but that was a heartbreaking moment when I saw that book continue. At first I thought, it's just a little bump, but then Daredevil 1 just has continued over the last year. It's just continued to grow.
It hasn't made the leaps and bounds that some of the other Marvel properties have, but yeah, it's definitely gone up. I mean, it hasn't gone up Hulk money or X-Men money, but it's gone up. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So along the same lines, then, has there ever been a book that you bought that, looking back on it, that for whatever reason, either because you paid too much money or just sort of the buyer's remorse sets in, something you wish you would have let go?
Yeah, I mean, I purchased. It's hard. So I mean, I've let books go too early or too late. I sold my first appearance of Deadpool way too early, and then that book exploded. Right. I sold my first appearance of Carnage, which I still believe could have been a 9.8 if you'd pressed and cleaned and sent it in. And some of those I felt like I sold too early, but I always feel like if you're ready to let go of it, then it really doesn't matter at that point. I gave away a great, I think it's like the third appearance of the Wasp. So one of those early Ant-Man and the Wasp issues. And I had purchased it because I really liked the character of the Wasp. And then it was like, it's this weird piece in my collection that I don't need. And I gave it to Sam's Tangled Web, a friend of mine. And I was like, he's going to love this book. He loves anything Marvel, but certainly Silver Age Marvel is a whole other beast for him and I. I just felt like, I didn't need it anymore. And he could appreciate it. that's one of the things I've always loved about our community of collectors is the giving side of things that is so.
Yeah.
I try to explain it to friends and family, and they're all just like, you gave away like something that was worth hundreds of dollars. You're just giving these things away. My buddy Jeffrey Comic-Con was telling me about how much of a Gambit fan he was, and yet it was like a book he was never going to get, that 266, that first Gambit. And I was like, I've had this book a long time, and I'll get another one later on. So I sent it to him, and then within, say, 2 months, my friend TJ Watson sent me his copy of 266 to replace the one I had just sent out. It was just the nature of this community of collectors where we're all knowing that it's just paper, right? It's just funny, silly paper. And the giving side of this is just is the best part. It's the most mind-blowing part.
Yeah, definitely no arguments here. Yeah, it's kind of strange because out of everybody so far, I think I've interviewed, nobody's had a book that they really had buyer's remorse on. No, it's odd. I thought for sure, because I can think of a lot that I, most likely because I overpaid for it. But everybody I've interviewed though, that not a single person yet has said, no, nothing that really I wish I wouldn't have got. Everybody's got tons that they let get away or gave away.
Well, I'm sure if the Y the Last Man TV show just bombs and that book goes like Preacher, then I will have way overpaid for that book. So check with me in a year, and I'll let you know that might become. But the truth is, even then, I got a pretty good deal on the 9.6, but I also was like, I just want this book. So even if it bottoms out, I'll be saying to myself, well, I overpaid for that, but I'm super glad that I have one, So,
and that series is pretty close to. I mean, I think it's in production now.
Yeah,
they're filming.
I think they're so that'll be on FX and Hulu. So it could be in 2022 you start seeing those episodes.
It's one of the few I'm actually looking forward to because that was the last series I really enjoyed start to finish.
I mean, I hope they have Brian K. Vaughan helping out because I know he writes television and produces television as well. But I just hope they got a great handful of creators involved to really make something special out of it.
Then I assume you have the rest of that series in trade paperback form, or
I've got trade paperback wise. I've got a bonkers set of Vertigo and Image trades. Individual issues, I probably have 70% of that run because I came into it a little late. So I didn't have the first, say, 20 issues, but I've picked up a few here or there.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. You have to shoot me a list. Let's see if I can help you out.
Yeah, I will, for sure.
I got dupes. So let's see. Awesome. Third keyword.
Nope. Okay.
Third keyword. I like to give people colors. So let's go with green since you got unless I'm colorblind, you got a green shirt on today.
I do. Yeah, this is from my friend Whitewell Comics has his anti-joy equation shirt where he put a beard on the dark side. Yeah, give it a little Whitewell Comics love there with the beard.
Right. Question number 5. This is always my favorite question. I'm an art person, even though I have absolutely zero artistic ability. Who's your favorite artist?
And so I probably got the most amount of books out for this. This might take the longest of any of the things here. So
that's when it comes to art. Awesome.
Right. It just goes and goes. So I mentioned Mike Zeck earlier for Secret Wars, and I'll get to that in a second here. But I'm a huge Mike Zeck fan. And when I went to Baltimore Comic-Con 2 years ago, I definitely brought a couple of books to get signed by him. And of the Kraven's Last Hunt storyline it's just gorgeous. I I adore these issues. So I had to get that one signed. And I also got my favorite Secret Wars cover is this Doctor Doom cover. And I mean, firstly, Doctor Doom is just a great character. The look and design, but the backstory, and this is Doom in all of his glory right here.
And that's another Zek.
That's another Zek. Yeah. So as far as Zek goes, I Zek all day. I love that Secret Wars run. Even this issue number 1 cover, which is kind of bonkers. It doesn't make a lot of like physical sense. I still absolutely love everything. So Mike Zeck, between Kraven's Last Hunt and Secret Wars alone, I feel like Mike Zeck is top tier Marvel artist for me. And Marvel, I'm more of a Marvel than a DC guy, so I tend to like lean heavy to Marvel. But yes, all day, Mike Zeck. And then of course on the X-Men side, people like John Byrne and Dave Cockrum.
Right.
I adore the color work. In fact, as an adult, I've gone back and said, like, I've done shows on these issues and felt like the colors always are blowing me away. So many great colored pieces that just pop. So the John Byrne era. I mean, you look at a John Byrne cover and you're just like, "Yep, that's Byrne. That's amazing."
Yep. Yeah, and there's certain artists that you look at the cover and you don't even have to look for a signature. You just know who it is.
Yeah, like the Kirby Crackle is the same kind of way. You look at a Kirby cover and you're like, yes. But for me, it's been more Byrne than anybody else. You just see a Byrne cover and it's like, that's what Wolverine looks like. That's what Storm and Cyclops and Marvel Girl, that's what they look like. So Byrne and then of course Cockrum as well, because this is a Dave Cockrum. This is probably my favorite X-Men cover. Just a masterpiece. I love the Cyclops' visor looks so cool. Yeah, I mean, absolutely great. And it's got almost all my favorite X-Men right there. I'm a Nightcrawler and Storm fan. So for me, it was always from Marvel. Yeah, Byrne, Cockrum, Zek were big on my list. I showed those Frank Miller, the Frank Miller run. And I don't think Klaus Janson gets enough respect. For people that don't know, he was basically the inker for Frank Miller on most everything he did. But Miller was working at one point on 2 Daredevil issues a month, writing, drawing, and publishing those issues, right? And it basically became such a workload that Miller would do a quick sketch and Janson would basically draw the image and ink it and make it look beautiful. So in a lot of ways, I feel like Klaus Janson is just as integral to that Frank Miller era of Daredevil. And I was glad to talk to him a little bit at Baltimore as well and hear him talk about that time and what it meant to him, because I feel like he's just a big a part of it as anybody.
It's always neat when you get to spend a little bit, even if it's just 2 minutes across a table with an artist that you enjoy their work, whether it's artist, writer, any creator.
Totally. So I could do a little bit of DC for people as well, and I'm a Miller fan, so Batman Year One, I'm a big fan of that. But this is really for me the star of Batman Year One is Mazzucchelli, right? David Mazzucchelli does an amazing job. His version of the Batman universe, Gordon and Bruce, it's exactly the way I picture those characters. So I adore the artwork in Batman Year One, and it still holds up as my favorite Batman story. Along with you get Mazzucchelli did Born Again, which is probably the greatest Daredevil comic book storyline. And I think Miller and Mazzucchelli work so well together that it just means a ton to me, the work that they did. And I'm not a Frank Miller hater either. I know his artwork is a little bit more raw. But I do love, obviously, The Dark Knight Returns is pretty phenomenal as well. And a book that I read 1 trillion times as a little kid. Absolutely adored that. Now, current stuff, you could talk about cover artists, and I think Jenny Frison is unbelievably talented. And I would love to meet her at some point and get some books signed just to hear a little bit about her work and what she does. But Jenny Frison, I just feel like she is a master. And you name the book, whether she's doing a Something's Killing the Children cover, whether she's doing, she's doing a Die cover. I'm very excited to see what she does for Stephanie Hans's Die. So then you've got Joshua Middleton. I think there's just some amazing cover artists working these days. I'm an Art Germ fan. I think anybody who's been doing covers for Wonder Woman in the last 5 years, they've just been slaying the variants over there. And that leads to interior artists today. And I'm a Joelle Jones fanboy. I think Joelle Jones is a superb artist, and she's coming into her own as a writer as well, doing this book, Wonder Girl. And it's just one of the most immaculately drawn comics. And I think she's just got a way with real hard, sharp line work that just explodes off of the page. And there's a splash page in here. Where it's like the entire DC universe.
Yeah, that's a nice spread.
It's a spread page. I was just about to say. But you've got, you got all the Batman characters popping in and out. You got Harley Quinn down there. You got Catwoman, Nightwing with his dog, or is over here Nightwing. She's really unconventional in a lot of ways. She works kind of slowly, so she does get dinged with it's hard to keep up with the schedule of publishing each month. But I feel like those writers and artists who are doing both jobs deserve that latitude, Well,
Image got away with it for 10 years.
Right, absolutely. So currently, Joelle Jones, and then lastly, I mentioned her a couple of times, but I'm also a Stephanie Hans fan, and I feel she does a ton of variants as well. But the run of Die has just some amazing pieces of artwork, and I'm just there's so many, and obviously interior artwork as well as covers. She just has a way with detail and color, just an unbelievable talent. So Joelle Jones and Stephanie Hans are probably my favorite interior artists these days, and of course they do variants and covers as well. And those ladies are on another level.
When it comes to the new art, I know next to nothing. I mean, I think everybody knows I'm an old book guy, not a new book guy. So I'm starting to pick some up here and there, and some of the names you're talking about I do recognize from watching some of the streams. So I'm not totally unfamiliar, but
well, I mean, and I think it goes through eras. Like I know I was not following art from basically 96 to 2010 or 12. Like there's a big chunk in there of almost 20 years where I was like, I don't know who was making comics then, because I was in college and having kids and getting my teacher's credential and doing all these other things. I wasn't reading books. And then I had my daughters and I started reading again and came back into things. So people ask me all the time about, what did you like about the X-Men in the early 2000s? And I was like, not reading it, I guess. I don't know. So I think we all have those gaps in our reading, and that's totally normal. There's a ton that I have never read and that I probably won't get a chance to.
But that's definitely, I mean, you got some eclectic art taste there from, all over the spectrum, that's what most people do. I think they don't pick one style, and and just only buy or only appreciate that style of art.
I think you find the art, like you mentioned earlier, you find that writer or artist that speaks to you, and then you kind of build on that. And so I'm finding, some of the Stephanie Hans covers that she did for Mockingbird, and then moving over and seeing, oh, she actually writes some stuff as well, and then connected to that, and then we did White Whale Comics and I read Die for a book club, and I was like, this is amazing. And then it's just sort of like I started seeking out other things that she's done. There's an artist named Dustin Nguyen, and he did all the watercolor art. He did all the art for Descender, which is an image book, and it's all watercolor, which I never thought I'd see a comic book fully watercolor. And he's done it for, what are they on now? I think the 9th trade paperback. And it's amazing. And it's so much detail that he can get from watercolor. It's such an unusual form. And I know people that are like, it's not for me. And I totally get it. But it was very refreshing to see something totally different. And he plays with the panels in a totally different way, which works for his story. He's not doing, Action Comics. He's doing his indie book, and it works.
Right. I know I said I wasn't going to play with my cameras, but I do have to show one book I've got. Where I said I'm a old school artist. Old school being 90s. This is for a modern book. This is Joe Linsner with a Virgin variant for Chasing the Dragon #1, second printing.
I love the scales in the background.
Yeah, so Linsner, his claim to fame was the Dawn character and Death character from the late 80s and early 90s, but he's still doing covers, and I was onto this series from the start, but then when I found out the second printing was going to be his cover, I'm like, well, I better get 5 of them.
Take my money.
That's only one of the Virgin variants, but I do have more of the regular second printing on the way in.
But that's the cool thing. I think you find something that you're interested in, and then you're down that rabbit hole for a little while, finding so many other great things,
Yeah, and even some of the the old school masters, they did they after their I don't want to say past their prime, but when the new guys came around and they weren't drawing their old titles anymore, they went on and they continued to do books, some of them up until they died.
For sure.
And a lot of them are books that people have never heard of or never seen just because it wasn't a mainstream DC book or Marvel book, but they were off doing, they were still working, still drawing, still making art.
Well, and I think, like Kirby gets a lot of Marvel love, but I think he gets less love for what he did at DC, which I think is arguably superior stuff in a lot of ways. I love his Mr. Miracle run. I love the New Gods stuff. I'm just a big Darkseid fan. So for me, as much as I love his Avengers run, and I have a fair amount of the Avengers run, I will read Mr. Miracle more often than I will read that original Avengers run. There's something really fun about the really kooky, crazy elements of Mr. Miracle's world. And I love Big Barda, and, Granny is great. There's just so much to enjoy in that universe.
Right. All right. But so do you own any original art?
I have a very limited amount, but I'm happy to share.
I'm more than happy to look.
So I try, primarily I buy original art or I buy sketch covers and things from community members. And I think you and Pocan Joe talked a little bit about some of that. And I want to mention, of course, California Blend. Gabby made this really great Batcave piece behind me here.
I was going to ask about that because I noticed that on your wall there. It looks like a published poster. I mean,
it totally does, yeah. And it's a beautiful piece, and I can get it down. I just don't know. I know I'll probably have to hang it back up, and I don't want to knock anything over. But really beautiful, a bunch of great detail work, and she's just a really great young artist trying to make her way and kind of find her mark. And so I also bought a sketch cover of Green Lantern that she did for me. So this is by Gabby, again, California Blend. And this is one of the newer Green Lanterns named Joe from Far Sector. And I loved that story, and I thought it was a really cool take on Green Lantern. And she did this really, I mean, she did all the background. She did all the colors, all the stars and everything. Really great. I just love this. So thank you, Gabby. Again. Shout out to you. And I also have one from Sin Potter. Chin does a lot of really great pieces, and you can find him on Instagram. And he was working in an auction and doing sketch covers on the side. And he had an X-23 blank, and I had been reading All New Wolverine, where Laura Kinney becomes Wolverine. I said, hey, can you take that X-23 cover and put female Wolverine on it? And he's like, yeah, you got it. And it came out even better than I thought it was. It's like, oh my gosh, this is cool. So that character, I think, is probably my favorite of any new X characters made in the last, I don't know, maybe even 30 years. I think she's probably my favorite one. Just a really interesting take on the Wolverine mythology. And then, okay, so lastly, I'm very unfamiliar with this piece of original art, because it was sent as a little gift. Somebody was like, here, I have this original art. It comes from a comic book called It, The Terror from Beyond Space. The artist is Mark Dos Santos, and it's an inked and sort of finished piece of art. So
you know what issue?
I was just going to check. The March 2019, it says 28. I can't imagine there were 285 issues, but it might be issue 285. So I have yet to hunt down and find the issue that this went with.
The book was from 2013.
So it's not the 2019? Okay.
No, that's maybe when it was cataloged or bagged. Yeah, The Terror from Beyond Space.
Yes.
And you said what? Dean Zachary?
Mark Dos Santos.
Maybe there's more than one, unless.
So this was a gift, and I have not found or read the book, but I was like, look, there's like space zombies, and I like sci-fi, so I was like, this looks pretty cool. There's like lasers, and yeah.
All right, 2010. It's a second series.
Okay.
It's a second series. Who knew there was a first series, let alone a second, right?
Right.
And it is Mark Dos Santos. IDW Publishing.
IDW. Okay, now I know where I'm looking.
And it's
how many issues?
There's 3 issues.
Oh, then that should be easy to hunt down.
With one variant, it looks like. So, yep.
And then the last one was so there's a gentleman who had a channel called I Love Signed Comics. And he was notorious for giving away just tons of stuff, raffles. If you're in the chat, hey, you can win. And I won this amazing sketch of Phoenix.
Oh, that's nice.
It's just, my wife calls it the booty cover. I just think it's gorgeous. I love the Phoenix and the flames here. It's just beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous. And I'm sorry that I can't remember the artist's name, but I want to say it was Heinrich, but I like the same as the writing up here at the top. But I know I posted it on my Instagram when I first got it, so I'm sure it's on there somewhere. But I need to get this. I've been waiting to get this framed at some point. It's just beautiful.
Now that's a rabbit hole you don't want to go down.
Right? Framing?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's it. That's my original art that I've purchased up to now.
It's for some, it's an addiction. I'm not going to say who, but for some.
I mean, I can see myself eventually deciding that, like, I've purchased the issues that I really want to own, and do I want to continue collecting things inside of this hobby? And I could easily see myself saying, I want to get a page from certain books that I love, certain runs. Like I'm a big fan of Vertigo comics I mentioned earlier, and I might want to get some page by Mark Buckingham, who I think is a phenomenal artist, and one of the nicest guys I met at Baltimore too. Like he had his little booth, and my friends were buying original art from him there, and I was like, oh, if he had a page from Fables there that I really liked, I might have even jumped on that one.
Right. Yeah, but that's unfortunately everybody wants to jump on something like that. I have better luck finding pages and then that just looks interesting and not even knowing who did it, what book it's from,
right?
And then go get the book. Because I figure if I already know the book and I know the artwork in it, it means it's going to be expensive. It means everybody knows it. So
well, and nowadays it seems like a lot of the artists are working digitally anyways, so there's no master prints like there used to be back in the day.
Right. I mean, and just even if you take something like Fables, which had what, about 150 issues.
Yeah.
So, and what, in 24 pages per book, 3,600 pages total.
Yeah.
For how many people read those books, like those books, would like to own a page from it?
Yeah.
That's so now you see why some artwork goes for
demand.
Yeah, there's lots of 5-digit artwork out there that I just never dreamed would be.
Yeah. Totally.
All right, awesome. I love it when people have art.
And I don't have that often to share it, and it's been sitting up on the shelf waiting for a frame, and it's like, oh, let's get these down. Let's share them out.
It's easier to share when it's in a binder because you can take it out and show it, put it back in, as opposed like you don't want to go pull that painting off the wall. So it just happens to be in view though. So
right, exactly, yeah.
But yeah, I could grab any binder out and start leafing through pages and showing them. But the ones that are hanging on my walls at the house, they're not coming down here.
No. But so, you get to look at them more regularly.
I do. I get to sleep with them. Did I say that out loud?
Yeah, hey, I'm with you. When that giant size X-Men comes back from CGC, it's gonna have a spot in the bedroom for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, might need one of Poke and Joe's holders for it. All right. Back at the sketch covers. Those were both ones you actually commissioned from the artist, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah. And I have a few. I try to buy on occasion blank sketch covers for that very reason, just to kind of say I like these characters, I like this run maybe, and if I find an artist who has the time and I can mail it to them and they could make something special on that cover, it means more to me. So I don't want it on just some random book. I usually want it on a book that means a little something to me art-wise.
Right.
So I got Batman Black and White issue #1 from the most current run, and they had a sketch cover at my shop, and I was like, that's perfect, because that's a book that's all filled with really great black and white art. So if I find an artist that I really like, even if they're just somebody in the community that's nearby, and I can say, hey, for X amount of money, can you put a really great Batman or Catwoman or something on the cover here?
Right. And I'll say it every episode: support your local artist.
Exactly.
Yep. All right. You're right. That was your long-winded topic. It's good. I can talk art all day. Let's move on to question number 6.
Okay.
Home stretch. Last 2 questions.
Yeah.
What do you collect besides comic books and comic-related items?
All right. So I've shown this a few times on my channel, but not too many times. I definitely love movies and TV, and I have a ton of DVDs and Blu-rays. So that's the TV and kids movie section, and it goes down the line there a good ways. So I went to college for filmmaking and and writing and all those kinds of things, and so I have just a real love for movies and TV. So I tend to collect a lot of that dead art, I guess you could say, of DVDs that nobody wants anymore. It's definitely been something that I've always cared a lot about. So yeah, I have an extensive disc collection going. Not as popular and nostalgic as like records for most people, but maybe one day there'll be people looking back and enjoy the nostalgia of a DVD.
Right, like VHS or laser discs.
Exactly. I will say the one benefit is those people that are like, oh, I really want to watch, Ghostbusters, but it's not streaming anywhere. I'm like, yeah, but I can just put my disc in and watch it like right now. I've had that issue a bunch. My brother's like, oh, I wanted to show the kids Harry Potter 2, but it's not streaming anywhere. And it's like,
yeah. Yeah, I guess I suppose if you subscribe to enough streaming services, there's probably nothing you couldn't find, but that would get pretty expensive.
Right? The a la carte format.
Yeah, bad enough picking one or two. So, other than movies, anything else that's on your collecting?
No, I mean, I think my wife would get really frustrated if I had too many avenues for this stuff. The comics and the entertainment side has always been the big thing for me. I used to do baseball cards when I was a kid. I had a Hank Aaron card, and I had a few like older cards I was proud of, but I also had like a ton of Jose Canseco and
right.
Clavia and stuff that's not worth anything. So yeah, baseball cards when I was a kid, but I got out of the sports thing a little bit when my brothers kept staying in it. I got into comic books, and that's kind of where my money went as a kid.
And did the cards go to your brothers, or do you still have them? Or?
I still have the Hank Aaron card, and probably way more Jose Canseco cards than I want to admit. But that's probably most of it.
Yeah, so that was 86 is when you said you were into the books. 87 would have been that Canseco card.
The Bash Brother days.
Yeah. Yeah, him and McGuire. Yeah, it was one of those clear cards. I had them both on the same.
I have that card. I think. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Joe had a fly in his episode. Now I got the fly in mine.
It's that time of year.
I see you got a couple of Funkos behind you. Do you have a big?
I do, and I don't have a very big collection. I only have a handful, and they're mostly gifts that people had sent to me because they knew that I liked characters like Doctor Doom, and that's a Joker, and I have a Dark Phoenix. So I have some of the villainous characters. They don't last long at my house because my girls will always want to take them out of the box and play with them. So it's hard to keep those things safe.
Okay. Let's see. I still got to give you one more keyword.
Okay.
One more keyword. Let's go with, so far we've got male, Wolverine, green, and let's go with water. Water.
Tricky. I gotta think on that.
Okay. Well, you got another minute or two to think about it. Depends on how long-winded you want to make this next answer to your unknown question.
I'm just gonna stretch it.
So, I noticed, and just from showing your last collection, this is kind of what I had planned on your last question being all along. So you jumped the gun on me a little bit when you showed off all your movies. But I know you're big into movies. You have movie reviews all the time. Your Academy Award night, that was kind of a fun show. Especially since here for the last year, nobody's been able to really go to a movie. All you can do is whatever you could stream, whatever streaming service you had. So where does that kind of love for movies that you have, where did that come from? And did it I assume it was there probably before the comics, or did one come after the other, and how do you tie them both together other than the obvious MCU and
right. Nowadays is the perfect time to be a comic book movie lover, right? It's like we're
right.
in the heyday, I feel like. Well, I will credit my dad in a big way with that movie love. He loved movies, and he was a principal and an educator. And his high school, where he was a principal, had an amazing audiovisual arts program, and they were always sort of encouraging kids to make movies and to tell stories, and he definitely instilled a lot of that in me, especially and a love of old movies. So I watched a ton of black and white movies with him as a kid, and westerns. Like he likes to say that I'm named for John Jameson Irish whiskey, but also John Wayne, neither of which I can ever live up to. But I've seen pretty much every John Wayne movie after he became kind of famous, because I'm not going to go watch all the little like black and white ones where he was pumping them out like one a day. But like the majority of John Wayne's collection of films I've seen and I grew up with. And then, of course, James Stewart and Gary Cooper. And so I watched a lot of old movies in the 70s, 80s, and 90s when my friends were only watching, the big blockbuster Will Smith movies. I was definitely watching older stuff. Ooh, there you go. See? John Wayne pumped out a ton of movies a year at the beginning of his career. And later, maybe only 2 a year, but like he was so prolific in the amount of movies that he made. And I grew up watching a ton of that stuff.
And one of my favorite movies of his that most people have never seen was Pittsburgh.
Oh yes, I've seen Pittsburgh. Yeah.
But you ask most people, especially people who aren't movie buffs, that
right.
They're like, I didn't know he played football.
I mean, he had a nice diverse. I mean, obviously during and just after the Second World War, he had a lot of great war movies as well. And I struggle to remember the name, but there was one where he played a soldier who got injured, and then he started in his injury, he started designing what ended up becoming these Jeep carriers in the South Pacific. And so it's a true story about a real guy who was injured in the war and then designed the mini aircraft carriers that ended up helping win the war in the Pacific. It was an amazing movie. Him, Maureen O'Hara, and he had to learn how to walk. His character had to learn how to walk again. So a big chunk of it was John Wayne being in bedridden in a hospital and not wanting his wife to see him like that. And his best friend became his like physical therapist and got him up and moving again. And then he ended up inventing the Jeep carrier, which was this miniature aircraft carrier that allowed planes to sort of island hop in the South Pacific where they weren't able to before.
Wings of Eagles.
That's it. See, look at you.
That's the Google machine.
I know if I vamped long enough, maybe you'd have a chance. But he's got all these great little movies, and he gets typecast. I'm sorry, he gets labeled with being a one-note actor, and I don't think that's really fair. I think he was in the heyday of the Hollywood system where they wanted actors to be a certain type. And you look at a movie like The Quiet Man, which is probably my favorite John Wayne movie, and he has so many layers of depth in that movie and has so many interesting things going on. And it's just a great, subtle, romantic role that is not your typical John Wayne performance. And then, of course, movies like The Shootist, which is a masterpiece Western that people often forget about when they're talking about all his great Westerns. His last movie was so freaking good.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I grew up with a lot of that stuff. Hitchcock is probably my favorite filmmaker, and I grew up watching a bunch of his movies. Rear Window, Vertigo. These are great movies. Of course, I've got a Chinatown poster like in every one of my videos. So yeah, my dad really laid the seeds for that in me. And then in that late 80s period we keep going to, you had, Batman 89 and you had some of these amazing comic book movies start hitting. and of course I had already seen the Christopher Reeve Superman, which is still one of my favorite comic book movies ever. So there was definitely a little crossover there for sure, and then into that X-Men era and then the modern MCU era. There's a lot of great comic book movie crossovers going on, but I think it's also the people of our generation getting to make movies now and having nostalgia for these characters, which is allowing, for the heyday of the comic book movie.
So the kids have the same love of movies that you do.
They do, and they're also that rarefied group that is willing to watch black and white movies and not complain about it, which is it's a rarity. I have to say they've even seen silent movies because I have a few Chaplin movies and the like where I can hey, a lot of those, by the way, are on YouTube. If you want to watch old silent movies, Buster Keaton and the like, you want to show your kids those things, you can go on YouTube and watch for free. There's a lot of that stuff on there.
Right, a lot of that's public domain now.
And it's a great opportunity to show them kind of the history of these things. They love the movie Hugo by Scorsese, which has a lot of love for Georges Méliès, the French filmmaker who basically invented a lot of fantasy filmmaking. And that's a great look at the history of movies on top of just being an entertaining kids film.
So they don't have to have a singing crab or anything like that in it to watch it and enjoy it.
And they're getting to a point too where my oldest is like, can we watch a real movie? Is what her way of saying, I don't want animation. Like, can we watch a real movie? So they are getting to that age but now they're getting into that young lady phase where it's like they want romantic comedies. So yeah, exactly. And my challenge is introducing the occasional Die Hard. Let's get some action in here too. Like, we can blow stuff up and later watch while you were sleeping or whatever.
Yeah, I mean that's a Christmas movie you can watch all year round.
Right? They're not ready for Lethal Weapon, the other great Christmas movie, but Die Hard, they've both seen Die Hard and really enjoyed it. So I was like, okay, that's a win. They've seen all the Star Wars movies, that's a win. They've seen a ton of the Star Trek movies, that's a win. If they get their rom-coms as well, I'm okay.
Yeah, it's always a little give and take.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Awesome answer. Before we get into our half question, give you a little more stall time here. Is there anything else you want to touch on? Anything else you want to add? Something maybe you forgot to drop earlier?
I mean, we mentioned indies, and I did pull out a few things like for kids these days. Like, my kids love things like Canto. It's a great book, and I think one of the things I've also loved about indies is kids' books are really hitting a heyday. And we just read Eve by Boom Studios not too long ago, and I think that's been another great way. If you're talking about trying to get your kids into comics, I think some parents you try to give them maybe the books you read as a kid that might not resonate, but a book like Canto or a book like Eve, which is coming out monthly right now, might even be a better way to get them into reading those things, because it might speak to them more than my Hulk 180, 181 would speak to them now,
Right.
So that was something that I wanted to touch on, but I think we've done well covering everything up to now.
I'm actually interested to see what Comic Tom is going to be bringing out in his next box. He says he's got every box now is going to have one kid specific book in it.
Yes. So
and it makes it sound like it's going to be an original, not something that he just picked up off the shelf somewhere.
And I want to say it's through the Scout Comics.
I think
Scoot, which is their children's offshoot for Scout Comics. So kudos to Scout Comics for producing this kind of thing too. Because not a lot of people are. So I know IDW does as well, but I know it's cool that Scout Comics is doing it too.
I see you thinking. Are you
thinking? The word green is the one that's sticking me, but I think I can get there. Okay, so I've got male, and I'm going to go with the man version. Not
okay.
not the delivery version.
MALE.
Yeah, MALE. I got Wolverine, I got green, and I got water. So I will say Wolverine often fights a lot of male characters, and some of his best covers are the ones when they're fighting in water or around water. There are some specific. No, I can't get green in here. I will say some of my favorites. So, like, my question is, of the male characters that Wolverine fights with and has all these great water covers, is there one that you appreciate the most? I will say there's a great cover, got some great green with it, where it's Wolverine versus Punisher. And Wolverine, when I was in that 80s range, Wolverine and Punisher were the two most violently acceptable characters for me to read. And when they fought head to head, I was all about it. Of course, you have Hulk, the original Green Machine, and they had a lot of great covers together, Hulk and Wolverine. But for me, it was something about that Punisher versus Wolverine comic that was like, yes. That was hitting all the boxes for me.
Okay.
I kind of blended everything in there.
Yeah. We kind of got a mixture of question and statement, a little bit of interjection. It's yours. It works. That's all that matters. That's why it's a half question, because I never know what I'm going to get. So at least there was no profanity like Joe.
You can't put the mute button on that.
All right. So again, in closing, anything else you wanna dump on us?
I would just say thanks for doing this. I think it's nice in this community to have shows like this, or shows like Rod's Sunday Shout Out show, where you get a chance to see it's so easy to be in one little niche in our YouTube community and not see all the other people creating great content and entertainment out here. And so it's kudos to you for highlighting people and getting a chance to share across this YouTube world all the different things that are going on.
Well, appreciate that. I kind of want to get to know everybody a little better, and I think if I get to know them better and let other people get to know them better at the same time, that's the best way to handle it.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that will wrap up this episode. I'm Scott from Hoarder's Hide, and
I'm John from John's Comics for Kids.
And until next time.